guys, let's talk about the cheapest name brand hydraulic brakes I could find and if they are better than the no-name cable pull brakes that came on my bike. With this video, I hope to address two things. Firstly, how to know when you need better brakes, and secondly, was upgrading to the cheapest hydraulic brakes really worth it? These are the Shimano MT-200 hydraulic brakes. Both front and rear brakes were sold together and came ready to go out of the box. If you choose to route your rear cable internally, be aware you will need a new barb, olive, and a bleed kit. I happened to find these brakes for about $50 and were actually cheaper than some of the lesser known brands. And here are the original brakes that came with the bike. No name cable pull brakes. Before we get too far into this video, I want to make it clear that the cable pull brakes we are comparing are no-name brands that came on a cheap big box store bike, and no way represents all cable pull brakes. When I first got the bike, the brakes didn't seem all that bad. I was comparing them to my commuter bike that had rim brakes. In fact, if these were on a commuter bike, they may actually be just fine. However, these are on a trail bike, where the brakes play a bigger role. Even as a beginner trail bike, they seemed to be fine. But as I grew better at riding, I would challenge myself and demand more of my bike. I was doing longer trails, started taking on steeper terrain, and just more technical rides in general. As my riding abilities and confidence progressed, I would rely more and more on the brakes. It wasn't long before I was doing 10-mile trails. This was when I started noticing some serious arm pump at the end of my rides. This was due to having to squeeze the brake lever so hard. In fact, these brakes require 3 fingers just to get the braking force I need. As a novice rider, I didn't know that these were signs of needing better brakes. So let this be a lesson to you. If you find yourself having to use more than 2 fingers to stop, or having tired forearms after a ride, then you may want to consider upgrading your brakes. Now, when I started looking into hydraulic brakes, just like anything else in the biking world, there are so many options it can be overwhelming. Luckily for me, I had a goal of finding the cheapest brakes, so that limited my possibilities considerably. Ultimately, I went with the Shimano MT-200. These brakes came out of the box, ready to bolt onto my bike and work with my 160mm rotors without any issue. Appropriate mounting brackets will be needed for larger rotors though. The first thing that anyone says about hydraulic brakes is that the brake levers have a very satisfying feel. There's no up and down play in the lever, and it's very tight and solid. The lever pull is smooth and with almost no resistance. When the pads hit the rotors, the feedback in the lever is very solid. Despite these being the cheapest brakes I could find, they are very well made and give my cheap bike a better ride quality. So the brakes feel better, but do they really perform better? I would have to say yes and no. The hydraulic brakes can be used with only 2 fingers and can engage the rotors with less pressure than its cable pull counterpart. The brakes are easier to modulate on a descent and don't require a death grip to get the stopping power I need. After a long ride, my arms are not completely tired, which actually makes riding much more enjoyable. For this fact alone is why I would recommend upgrading your brakes. There is one downside to these brakes though. You may not find this to be your case, maybe you will, but for me, they don't have the same stopping power as my old cable brakes. Now granted, with the cable pull brakes, I was using 3 fingers instead of 2, and the cable brakes required much more force to engage and more force to stop. But when I would really yank on the brakes, they seemed to always continue to engage harder. Whereas with the hydraulic brakes, this doesn't seem to be the case. They don't seem to have the same overall stopping capability. Now this isn't a big setback as my riding style and the terrain I ride on don't require hard braking too often. But there have been times where I felt committed to going downhill at a speed faster than I would have liked. Keep in mind that this is on a 29er with 160mm rotors, so the wheel brake combo has the greatest mechanical advantage over the brakes. If this were a 27.5 with 180mm rotors, the brakes would have about 15% more mechanical advantage, which means better braking. In closing, the Shimano MT-200 hydraulic brakes have given my bike a feeling of quality it didn't have before. With its solid levers, its smooth and light pull, they have improved my trips on the trail, making braking easier and allowing me to ride longer without my arms getting tired before my legs.